Joining me now is best-selling author of groundbreaking works, including The War on the West, Douglas Murray. Douglas, I'm keen to get your thoughts on what is happening in Israel, but let's start in the US. You wrote last week in the New York Post about Kamala and co deserving an Oscar, and she's really taken your advice on board. We've had different accents from Kamala before, but this may be the first time we've had two in a single day.
Person in our nation has benefited from that work. You know, everywhere I go, I tell people, you may not be a union member, but you better thank unions for that 5-day work week. You better thank a union member for sick leave. You better thank a union member for paid leave. You better thank a union member for vacation time.
What happened to authenticity, Douglas? Kamala in Pittsburgh sounds very different to Kamala in Detroit.
Yes, Kamala is following in some very noble footsteps here, of course. Hillary Clinton was a great purveyor of different accents depending on the part of America she was in. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, of course, congresswoman, Democrat congresswoman, is also a fine one for if she's speaking to, for instance, a majority black church, she will go into a special register and put on an entirely new voice. So Kamala is doing something that's tried and tested. But you're right, Rita, it does not look authentic. It looks horribly pandering. It's just another example of the fact that America is trying to work out who this politician is, and they're not really getting an answer.
No. Now, you've written about some of the mad far-left Democrat policies being implemented in California. The Biden-Harris administration has had record numbers of illegal immigrants coming in every year of their administration, literally millions, and the Democrats refuse to take the sugar off the table. Indeed, they seem to be adding more inducements, including benefits that are not available to citizens, like a taxpayer-funded home loan program. Tell me about this and what is the rationale behind it?
It's amazing. The Democrats in California voted for, and now put before Governor Newsom, a proposal that illegal migrants in California could be given up to $150,000 of taxpayer money to get them onto the housing ladder. Now, this is the sort of madness that really can only happen in California. But of course, if Californian politicians keep on dominating in the US as a whole, maybe we will see it rolled out elsewhere. But I think it's another example of crazy far-left politics. And of course, it's the sort of thing which, I don't know, if, for instance, everyone who had paid taxes and worked in America was already happily on the housing ladder, and there was no unhappiness in the world or in the country, and everyone lived in exactly the house they wanted, I suppose this is the sort of lunatic proposal that you could come up with. But that isn't the case. Ordinary Americans, working Americans, are struggling to pay bills, to pay mortgages, to catch up with the unbelievable consequences of inflation in recent years. And now they're meant to also subsidize people and give money to people through the tax system to people who've broken the most basic rule, which is they've broken into the country. And I mean, you know, you always expect this lunacy is going to stop at some point, and that it'll stop when you just run out of money. But the thing is that it seems that the Democrats in California and perhaps wider afield in the US don't think that they ever will run out of money. They think they'll never run out of the taxpayers' money. We'll see if that Californianomics actually works. I would suggest that it won't, but it'll cause an unbelievable amount of misery when the rubber actually hits the road.
Now to Israel, where there are tens of thousands protesting, demanding a Gaza ceasefire and the release of the remaining hostages after 6 were executed by Hamas. And the pressure on Benjamin Netanyahu is intensifying further, Douglas, with President Joe Biden saying the Israeli Prime Minister is not doing enough to secure a hostage deal and ceasefire with Hamas. Is Israel's most important ally wavering in their support at this most crucial time?
Well, Joe Biden has spent recent weeks on the beach, literally on the beach, away on the beach with Dr. Jill. And so when he says that Prime Minister Netanyahu isn't doing enough, I'd love to know exactly what Joe Biden thinks his own work performance schedule has been like of late. And it isn't a theoretical question, that. One of the 6 hostages murdered by Hamas in the last week was an American citizen. And there used to be a time, Rita, and you and I remember it, when an American citizen being killed in cold blood by a terrorist group got the attention of the president and indeed perhaps even the vice president. But the president is on the beach. The vice president is on the campaign trail, studiously avoiding having to answer any questions from the media or indeed say anything of any substance. And this, I think, is a little glimpse into what happens in the world when America is absent. And I think it's shameful, shameful. American politicians should have ignored the American hostages for such a long time, played political football with the Israeli hostages, and now pretend that the Israeli government is the one not doing enough. The hostages are not in Benjamin Netanyahu's basement. They're in tunnels underneath Gaza, built by Hamas with Western taxpayers' money. And Hamas are the people who stole these people from their homes. Hamas are the people who have kept them underground for almost a year now. Hamas are the ones that have started summarily executing the hostages. And it is a sign of such pusillanimity as well as weakness that President Biden should think at that point that the person he should put pressure on is the Prime Minister of Israel. It's absolutely preposterous, a demonstration of weakness, because perhaps he knows that he has absolutely no say over Hamas. And again, there was a time when American presidents actually did have something to say about terrorist groups who murder their own citizens and the citizens of their friends and allies.
Meanwhile, we've got the Labor government in Britain shocking Israel and I think Brits alike by banning the sale of certain weaponry, including jet and drone parts. Foreign Secretary David Lamy stunned MPs with a decision set to stem from, and I quote here, pressure which Labor MPs have found in their seats as a result of pro-Gaza protests. Douglas, are Labor really allowing the mad mobs in the streets to set the nation's foreign policy?
Oh, you bet. I mean, David Lamy and Keir Starmer have shown double and triple standards just in recent days alone. Last week, Keir Starmer said that Britain would back Ukraine with giving them whatever was needed. That was the quote, whatever was needed for Ukraine to prosecute its war against Russia after the illegal invasion of Ukraine. At the same time as saying that they will give Ukraine whatever they need. And by the way, Britain is not going to give Ukraine everything it needs. Britain can't give Ukraine everything it needs. But that's what he says. Meantime, he's not even willing to sell the Israelis the things that they need to prosecute their war against Hamas. And that is for one reason alone. There is no sort of pro-Russian basis in the Labour Party that just would love to defend Russia. But there is a base within the Labour Party now, sadly, of people who think that you should just allow Hamas to win, allow the Palestinian extremists to win, and for Israel to lose in this conflict. And, what David Lamy has done is not just unbelievably treacherous to an ally, as the Speaker of the Knesset in Israel said a couple of days ago, citing Churchill's famous criticism of Chamberlain. Britain had a choice between war and dishonor, and it chose dishonor this week. But this arms sale change, this partial boycott by the British, will have no meaningful impact on the war, but it will have a meaningful impact on Britain. Britain relies very considerably in much of its arms and security apparatus on Israeli intelligence and Israeli technology. I wonder, and I hope that they don't, but I wonder if the Israelis would like to play this game back at David Lammy. He will see in the coming days that his cowardly little move, appeasing this nasty little bigoted rump within his party, will please absolutely nobody. Because you know what, Rita? The Hamas wing of the Labour Party are not going to be content with a little bit of boycott of Israel. They want a total boycott of Israel because they want the destruction of Israel. Well, David Lammy will, again, to quote a famous line about appeasement, be feeding the crocodile in the hope that it'll eat him last. But it won't.
Beautifully said. And yeah, Churchill had it right all those years ago. And the decision is certainly causing a diplomatic row with Benjamin Netanyahu. He's called it shameful and said it's going to embolden Hamas. And I think you're right. I think it is going to put at risk that relationship where Israel provides so much support and intelligence about attacks that may be being planned on UK soil. So it just seems to be a bonkers move any way you look at it. Before you go, we know the Labor MPs have their priorities right these days. Have a look at this clip of Secretary of State for Culture, Media and Sport, Lisa Nandy, talking about doing something about the high prices of Oasis tickets. I wish I was joking.
I don't know what conversations Oasis had about ticket pricing, but I do know that it's deeply depressing to have had this incredible moment where so many people, especially at my age, were incredibly excited that this event of a lifetime that they thought may never happen was happening, only to find that they had to queue for hours in a queue, and for many of them to find that when they got to the front of that queue they couldn't actually afford the tickets that were on offer. We think as a government that there's an overhaul needed of the regulations around ticketing.
I mean, there's all sorts of issues in that country: cost of living, energy crisis, knife crime. I could go on, but they're focusing on dynamic pricing for Oasis tickets. Douglas, what's your response to that?
I mean, everything else in Britain is clearly hunky-dory if a minister can focus on the length of time people have to queue and the fact that some people at the end of a queue feel sad. Of course, only somebody like Lisa Nandy would think that government needs to step in. Nobody in Britain will be free until we all have the right to not queue for any time at all and buy cheap tickets to Oasis reunion concerts. I think you and I can agree on that, Rita. It's a fundamental issue of human rights. We should all have everything we want as soon as we want it. And if we don't, then we need government to step in, because the government, particularly this Labour government, has proved so superb at dealing with all problems. So they should definitely step into the realm of policing queuing in the same way they police our opinions, what we can say online, what we can retweet. I think the next step is obviously tackling the great injustice of Oasis ticketing. And I'm delighted myself that Lisa Nandy has decided to step in. And I'm sure she'll make a really meaningful difference. And in time, she can also make sure that any concert tickets I want, I don't particularly want to hear Oasis, but if any tickets I want, I think I can get them straight away very cheaply. And I expect the Culture Secretary to really step in and help me in that noble endeavour.
And I also don't like queuing up either, or waiting online.
No.
So I would hope she would do something about that. Maybe a ticket seller per customer. That way we can just walk right up to the window, no lines. And maybe Liam and Noel Gallagher could be arrested. I don't think everyone else is being arrested in the UK. I don't see why those two should be exempt. Douglas Murray, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.